Hail jabronis, and welcome to Real Talk number 9. Last week I talked about whether or not there was a feud between Comicsgate and Iron Age, as well as an unfortunate anti-CG narrative that has began to be pushed by some Iron Age folks as a result of the situation between Ethan Van Sciver and Eric July. And since that video, there's been comments from EVS as well as A Drink with Crazy and a lot of folks just about Iron Age and Comicsgate. And as a result, there's been a lot of folks just posing the question of, well, what is the Iron Age? How does it differ from Comicsgate? Where do they cross over? So I figured I'd do a little bit of a deep dive into what is Comicsgate to me, as well as what is Iron Age to me, and kind of expand on some of my experiences with both groups, communities, movements. Well, we'll get into that. So, to start, to me, Comicsgate started out as a result of a group of mainstream comic artists that were being pushed out of the mainstream as a result of political stances, ideology, but also, artists that were just sick of the message being pushed and the content being pushed by the mainstream. Tying into that, they also wanted more creative freedom, right, to make better characters, write better stories, and, not be kind of treated in a hostile manner in the workplace. And so, these mainstream artists, they took a leap of faith and they started to crowdfund, right? They went independent. And after some saw success, from my understanding, more and more took that leap of faith and followed suit. And from there, you had, artists, creators that weren't in the mainstream, just regular folks like myself they saw the success that those folks were having and they became inspired by the fact that they were they were doing creator owned content. And they realized like, hey, I can do this too, right? I can not only create my own book, I can distribute it myself. And, I just have to put myself out there and ask for the funding. And so it created this like wildfire of creativity, and all of these creators, not only did they form a group, they formed a community based off of this movement. And so over time, the movement grew, the group grew, the community grew. And that's how you get to Comicsgate today. And it's still comprised of several former mainstream artists, and it's comprised of hundreds, if not thousands, of just regular creators. Again, like myself, folks that have always wanted to write a novel, create a comic, you name it. But obviously, it was initially centered, and it's a majority comic book creators because it was created or started by comic book artists, hence why it's in the name. And then you go on to the Iron Age. Now, when I first joined Twitter and started connecting with folks on the comic side of things as well as the novel side of things, obviously I got connected with a lot of folks in Comicsgate. It was pretty clear cut. You could tell, who associated with one another, all the people that streamed together, hung out, talked, all of that. It was really easy to make those connections. Whereas Iron Age, you could see that as well, and that's why I felt like Iron Age was also a group. It was a lot of people that would talk to each other, interact, and engage with each other on Twitter. They had Discords, they had, Guildeds, they had their own like communities or groups where they talked and hung out. They did streams together. So to me, it was like, hey, this is cool. And the difference to me was, with Comicsgate being more comic centric, Iron Age seemed to be like, hey, we also have a ton of novelists. You have people into like board games, music, things of that nature. So things outside of comics. And then there were some comic creators too, but most of them kind of were both, right? Consider themselves Comicsgate Iron Age, such as myself. And, it made sense for me because, I my primary creations are novels. And initially I just had novels. So, of course, I got connected with these folks, started chatting with them and watching their live streams, watching their videos. And it was great, right, to find fellow indie novelists that were super passionate about just making their own content the way they want to make it, not feeling kind of censored or kind of pressured to do their books or present themselves in a way that could get themselves traditionally published. I really appreciated that. And it reminded me of Comicsgate. Once I got connected with the comic artists in Comicsgate, started getting cover art, formed this idea for my mini comic, you know, I was involved with both sides of things, and they're essentially one and the same to me. And a lot of people use both hashtags, and it makes sense. To me, both of them were all about being independent, right? Not wanting to have to conform to what mainstream expectations are, the content that they're pushing, the messages that they're pushing, right? To just have unbridled creativity driving what you're making. To me, that's what being indie is all about. We know if you approach a literary agent or try to get published, it's a good chance you're not going to get chosen just based off of, factors such as your skin color, your sexuality, the and those things of your characters. It's not necessarily it seems like it's not about content or quality really at all. When you look at the query, wish lists and you submit to literary agents, the questions that they ask, it's not even relative to your characters or your story really. It's more about yourself and more so political or ideological stances. And that's where Comicsgate and Iron Age are on the same page, right? They're not about that, which is awesome. But as time went on, I started to realize that some folks that utilize Iron Age hashtag or whatnot, they really didn't like being considered a group or called a group. That's something I didn't quite understand, especially since most of them at the time seemed supportive of Comicsgate. Why wouldn't they be? You know? But that's what confused me initially because I'm like, yeah, this seems like a cool group of people. I like these people, but why are they so afraid of being called a group? So a few kind of questions popped up in my mind and the initial one is, well, is it because they're afraid of guilt by association? Is it because they're afraid of being canceled? Which to me, if you're indie, you can't be canceled really. Or is it because they've seen some of the hate and some of the vitriol aimed at CG, right? They've been called a hate group. They've been called a lot of things, which I've found are very untrue. And so I think some folks figured, well, if we don't consider ourselves a group, then we won't get lumped into such criticism. I don't think that really matters, right? If someone drags the Iron Age name through the mud, creates something disgusting and really um, kind of taints that tag, right, or name, well, you're either going to have to just um, make it clear, like, hey, I don't associate with that person, I don't agree with that person, but they don't represent the entirety of CG, or you're just going to abandon it. And so there's that part, right? Not wanting to be considered a group. And so a lot of folks say, well, it's a movement. And then others say, well, it's not a movement. A good chunk say it's a time period, an era. like the Golden Age, the Silver Age. But what's strange there is those eras are usually named after the fact, right? Looking backward. But this is being named in real time. What a lot of people say is that, this term was coined by Razorfist, right? Popular YouTuber, initially wrote novels, from my understanding, and then now has recently done a comic. Has always been friendly to CG, from what I understand, but for some reason didn't want to kind of, I guess, latch on to that and wanted to create his own term, maybe for marketing purposes or because it sounded more metal or unique. Not 100% sure, and a lot of people have kind of ran with that. So first, I want to start with two tweets, I guess, from folks that are, I guess, proud Iron Age, um, folks that represent um, the era, the tag, and that have, spoken out many times about what Iron Age is. And so I think it's good to see what they say it is, and then let people kind of, think on that and see, does that align with kind of what you think it is or what your experiences have been. And so first, I want to preface by saying this is not, aimed as um, any way to criticize these people or anything. I just wanted to look at how they define it, give my thoughts on it, and kind of expand on that. So the first one is from Katie Room, as you can see here popped up. She is a reviewer that is a big outspoken person about the Iron Age, really promotes it, has a YouTube channel. I've seen a lot of good stuff coming from her as well as her husband. I do think they're good folks in the space. What they're doing is very good. And so this was her kind of definition of Iron Age. So, number one, the current zeitgeist that embraces independence, crafting stories that trad pub would never touch. Since the goal isn't to gain their favor, this produces work that might be positive towards conservative or religious values, defy genre, are for a male audience, prioritize fun over PC messages, etc. Authors that identify with the zeitgeist and wish to find the like-minded, particularly readers that have been burned by tradpub propaganda masquerading as entertainment. It is a term that is timely, not merely indies in general, but indies who came out of the pandemic shutdowns determined to make something better. So reading that, it sounds just like Comicsgate, right? Not wanting to rely on the expectations of traditional publishing. So in the case for comics, right, Marvel, DC, etc. And CG does tend to have a lot of conservatives and Christians in it. And they like to do their own genres, do things that are defying genres. And they do prioritize fun, definitely over PC messages. You will not see really PC messages in Comicsgate. They're pushing the limits of their creativity and making what they truly want to make. Such as myself, having a Lovecraftian gargoyle story that's really gritty and about true heroism. And number two is where, even though they're not using the word group, it's to me where a lot of times these movements or eras, well, I don't know if I'll call it an era yet, but the whole point of the people that wish to find like-minded, creators or readers, well, that's a group of people, right? And I think in a lot of cases, people form groups naturally. It just comes down to whether or not they want to be considered a group. And that's one thing I appreciate about CG is they're not afraid to stand by the group, and they're not afraid of, hey, if some people criticize the group, they're not afraid to kind of take one on the chin with everyone else and stand their ground versus just being like, oh, well, I'm not part of that group, I just use the tag. Like, yeah, I think indies need to stand their ground and stand up against, people that are trying to degrade um, groups of people that are just passionate about what they do. And then, I mean, to me, about coming out of the pandemic or not, really, to me, it doesn't really have relevancy only because, I mean, again, Comicsgate has been doing this for a very long time, well before the pandemic, and there's been indies around for the longest time. So maybe the pandemic did create a surge of novelists and stuff. I'm not sure. Um, I didn't have a Twitter until, I don't know, 2 years ago, pretty much when the pandemic was well and kind of over. So, but that's one perspective. Again, not bashing that perspective. I can understand, where she's coming from. And again, I do see her as a good force in the space. So we do need more people that are, reviewing books, helping promote some folks. So I am glad she's doing that. And now the second one comes from John A. Douglas. So I'm going to preface this as well, saying, John is a great guy. I've talked with him, a lot. I've been on his channel. We've chatted quite a bit, and he's promoted myself. I've promoted him. He's a guy like myself who has, a family, a full-time job, but he still finds time to bring people on his channel, to promote folks, and to be a very positive voice in the indie space. Now, we don't agree with each other on everything, especially when it comes to like the Rippaverse and Snyder films, especially. But I really appreciate that he can respectfully disagree with you and not let it kind of taint his view of me as a creator and vice versa. And so John's definition in this tweet of the Iron Age is the Iron Age vehemently opposes the notion that it is a group, neither trying to emulate nor replace Comicsgate. It is the age of pro-indie entertainment we live in. Those of us who use Iron Age as a rallying cry merely prefer making or buying indie works over the mainstream. I have no issue with that statement. Definitely respect it. But again, I don't understand the staunch opposition towards the notion of being a group. Groups are not bad. And if there's a bad person in a group, it does not mean the entire group is bad, nor should that group be judged based on the actions or words of one person. So that's something I'm still not quite sure of, that fear of some folks to be considered a group. Meanwhile, having kind of chat groups and hanging out with a group of people, talking with the same group of people, as long as they go to bat for each other, if they get unjustly attacked. I mean, that's the most important thing. But I do think group of like-minded folks that really kind of stand by each other will only make the space stronger, right? Rallying in numbers is much stronger, and it goes a lot further than individuals rallying alone, right? Even with the same message. And so this kind of ties into my next thing, which is a huge difference to me between CG, Comicsgate, and Iron Age. And that is the lack of big player or big creator promotion in Iron Age. The one thing I've always appreciated about Comicsgate, and honestly, it's what led me to Comicsgate, was the fact that you had folks on every level promoting others, right? Bringing folks onto their channels, retweeting one another, following one another. Like, that's super motivating, especially from a marketing perspective and just making connections. Um, you know, it was crazy. Before I even had my awesome Corey Barton art, EVS followed me back. It's just like, holy shit, This guy's got like well over 50,000 Twitter followers. He has a massive YouTube channel, right? I mean, he's a comic book legend, right? And he followed me back. Like, to me, that's like, wow, that's really cool. And then I had other large, in my opinion, CG creators, follow me back. And now, I mean, I'm almost followed by almost all of them, right? I've talked with most of them. I've been on nearly all of their channels. I've been on EVS's channels several times. I've been on Mandy Summers' channel. I've been on Rennie's channel, Bancroft, Sontag, all these awesome people. There's too many to name, but the fact that a guy who is primarily doing novels was able to make those connections just shows how open that community is and welcoming, despite them being attacked, as well as, had people stab them in the back in the past. I mean, that's just awesome. And on the flip side of Iron Age, there's only really one, maybe three large creators that, let's say, wave the Iron Age banner or use the hashtag. Yeah, obviously, you have Razorfist, who they say coined the term, maybe Shad Brooks, and then most recently, Eric July, even though he doesn't believe in an indie community or groups as well, from my understanding. And, from the last 2 years I've been on Twitter, I have not seen Razorfist promote other folks, maybe a very rare few times, primarily using the tag to promote himself. Um, Same with Shad Brooks, and Eric, as we know, is not a big fan of promoting others. He does promote the folks that he hires a little bit, but in general, I haven't witnessed the three of them kind of stepping up to the level that a lot of the large CG creators are at, to promote folks, to really help the little guys level up, help give them exposure, because to me, that's what's most important in the indie space, right? Is everyone working together, wanting to lift one another up. And so that's a big variance that I see in Comicsgate versus Iron Age. And I hope that changes over time. I hope those few larger creators in the Iron Age will kind of have that passion to see that movement or era, the hashtag grow. And the only way that can happen is by creating more larger creators, right? Just leveling everybody up so that there are more backers, more sales, more popularity in the space. If all the popularity is only with those few folks, it's not really helping the movement or the little guys. There's very few people that are following or just searching a hashtag and then drilling down to find smaller creators. It's going to be word of mouth, and heavily word of mouth, of the bigger creators to the smaller. And things as simple as a retweet. I mean, that can be huge, right? A quick shout out on a stream. So, that's, again, something I really appreciate CG, and I hope things improve on the Iron Age side of things. Now, in regards to the smaller creators, yes, Iron Age is where it should be for the most part. There's a lot of folks retweeting each other's projects. There are folks doing streams like Johnny Douglas, like A Drink with Crazy, that are bringing folks on, promoting them, trying to improve the space, give exposure to folks. Awesome. That's what we need more of. But we need it also from the bigger folks in the space. Um, so that's one thing that I've noticed, again, navigating both kind of waters being involved with creators on both sides of these two groups, movements, whatever you want to call them, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. The other thing that I've noticed is that to me, Comicsgate has been a little bit more open-minded. Um, you can have a differing opinion on movies, on particular creators within Comicsgate or outside of Comicsgate, and I haven't really experienced folks like unfollowing you or bashing you for that. Maybe I've been lucky, but it's been very comfortable so far. It's been the same for the most part in Iron Age, in regards to Iron Age folks, with some exceptions. There have been some folks who, just because of your views on certain films or not liking their favorite large creator, that they instantly unfollow you or kind of become closed-minded. And to me, that's just crazy that you would possibly eliminate potential support, retweets just because, like, hey, he doesn't like my favorite creator. He's criticized that creator's work. I mean, again, that's high school shit to me. Um, I appreciate folks that will respect your opinion, and if they don't like a tweet or a certain stance, they just kind of scroll by and, they don't let it taint their overall view on you. In the end, we're all indie, and, you would hope they would see that, hey, this person's promoting folks, he's doing videos trying to help folks, he's being positive. But honestly, there's been folks that they see that, oh, he doesn't like the Rippaverse. He doesn't like, um, or he really likes, Zack Snyder films. Like, no, no, unfollow. It's happened on several occasions, um, just on the Iron Age side of things. So I do hope folks will be a little bit more open-minded about having differing opinions. I mean, to me, folks can like different political candidates. I mean, they can be on the other side of the political aisle. If overall they seem like a good person and they're doing good things in the space, I'm still going to follow them. I'm still going to retweet their work. Why not? So that's, something I just don't quite understand. The other thing I've noticed too is, when it comes to larger creators, I've noticed in the Iron Age that some folks will agree openly with bad advice from those creators. And maybe it's because they're hoping to get a retweet, hoping to maybe in the future get a shout out from them, to seem like they're an ally to them. Um, I mean, for example, the thing that went around a couple months ago, it was a tweet by Eric July of, where he said creators should never ever ask for promotion. I've done a video about whether or not you should ask for promotion. Are you obligated to promote other creators? And to me, I thought that was very, very bad advice. Why? Because if I wouldn't have asked others for promotion for a chance to be on their channel, I probably would have gotten 20% of the backing I have today. And, well over 120, 150 backers wouldn't have my books in their house right now, and they wouldn't have been exposed to some fantastic writing and art. That's a shame. And so it was really crazy to me to see folks actually agreeing with that or defending it openly. And it's like, guys, you should want these larger creators to promote others. The more they promote others, the bigger chance that you have that, whether from the top or um, as a trickle down effect, that your stuff is going to gain exposure, right? And that you're going to be able to gain more traction. To agree with something that openly opposes all of that, to me, is mind boggling. And again, this is where Comicsgate has gotten it right, right? You have EVS and others at the very top, Shane Davis, Mandy. Again, they bring smaller creators, they bring creators from every level onto their channels, they retweet creators at every level, and everybody benefits from it, especially long term. Iron Age folks, you should be promoting the idea of promotion, right? We should be expecting more of it from the larger creators. It should not be okay for folks to just benefit from a hashtag, a group, a movement, an era, and not want others to flourish or not try to, when you have a very large following or reach, to not want to use that for good, to help others. I'm not saying all the time, and I'm not saying they're obligated, but I do think it's something that they should do. It could be as simple as 10 minutes a week doing retweets, anything, right? I think that's where the Iron Age community can really, really learn from CG. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of the smaller creators are doing it on the Iron Age side. Some I've noticed are not. They see everyone more so as competitors. They're afraid of losing sales if they retweet folks. They don't follow anybody back. You do get some of that right in every group. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's good to be agreeing with or promoting, it's ironic, promoting the idea that you shouldn't ask for promotion or that people don't need to promote others. How is a movement going to grow? How are you going to make sure that the best content quality gets the exposure it needs to compete with the mainstream or maybe somehow get itself into the mainstream to change the landscape? It isn't going to happen if people aren't lifting each other up, if they're not promoting from top to bottom. So that is one thing I've noticed. Um, the other thing is, there was a situation a while back where there was a very positive creator that he was CG, he was Iron Age, had his own promotion group where he, provided a space for folks to share their tweets so that everyone could retweet it to invite people to streams, right? And that person got dogpiled by a large creator as a result of defending one of my tweet responses, which was a very tame observation, by the way. And that creator stood his ground, and he didn't take a kind of backhanded donation to his campaign, which was driven by an insult. And you saw a lot of CG people back him up and promote him as a result to help him gain a bunch of sales. It was awesome on that regard. But there were a lot of folks on the Iron Age side of things that did not defend him because they were afraid of being seen as a detractor, maybe, or not being an ally to that large creator that put him on blast. And a handful of folks left that promotion group. It's like this guy created a group specifically to help everybody, right? He's invited folks onto his channel, like super positive guy, and he just left his group just because he stood up to someone bullying him online. I mean, not that I agree with it, but it's one thing to not stand up for him. You could have just stayed silent, and most did, but to just unfollow him and leave his group to me was really disheartening. Like, really disheartening. And so, I really, really hope that we won't see more situations like that. But yeah, yeah. Um, uh, I probably a good amount of you people probably recall that situation. I'm not gonna bring names into it or anything because I'm sure it was uncomfortable enough for that creator. But I really appreciated the fact that he stood up for me, and I've seen him stand up for others. But it was disappointing to see folks kind of turn their back on him. Um, to me, it made me respect him even more. Standing his ground, standing by his beliefs. Bravo. That's CG. That's what, from my understanding, that's what Iron Age should be, right? They're about standing up to the message, the lack of quality that the mainstream is putting out, and standing by your beliefs, your hopes, your dreams. The last thing I'll cover is just one thing I've noticed with some Iron Age folks, and again, preface this, I said this in the last video. When I say some, I'm not judging all of Iron Age creators. I'm not lumping everyone into one group and judging them all, okay? I'm just saying from what I've witnessed, there are some individuals that say or do certain things. So, again, I consider myself both. Even if, some people have kind of distanced themselves from me for, this in the last video, but I think, again, that's what this real talk segment is all about. Just having open, honest conversations about things that I've witnessed. And again, to my last point, these videos are getting too long. I like to keep them short, but it's a big topic. One thing I've noticed with some Iron Age folks is they're hyper focused on money, on the financial success being the only factor that determines if an indie creator is successful versus quality content or a mixture of all three. I've even seen and argued with folks about my belief that financial success does not equate to quality, right? There are plenty of products, creations out there that have made a ton of money but lacked in quality. For example, Captain Marvel. To me, very subpar movie, made a ton of money. We've all seen really bad movies make a lot of money, and we've seen movies that didn't make much money that were phenomenal. An example would have been like The Accountant or Man from U.N.C.L.E. Phenomenal films, just didn't make much in the theater. And so it's really sad to me that folks are just like, hey, let's hyper focus on this creator or a few creators that they've just made a bunch of money. We want to be those creators. We want to make that money. But they're not talking about the quality of the creations from those creators. And it makes you question, well, is that because the quality is lacking? Is the content lacking? Because if the creations are so phenomenal, folks should be ranting and raving about them, right? You should be talking about how you really want to create a hero like A or B, right? You should really want to create a universe like this. There should be specific examples of, what made you love those creations, but most of the discussion is around the money, how much they've made. And I think some folks want to also, in a way, have this group mentality of, well, hey, this person in Iron Age made a lot of money. We did it. We're doing awesome. Like a collective we, which it's like, but if you're not a group, how can it be we? And if it's an era, it includes Comicsgate, it includes everything, technically, that's being created in this time period. Even mainstream, right? So that's where the confusion can come in, clearly. But in the CG side of things, I'm seeing folks talk about not just the financial success. I mean, that's obvious. There's folks that have been making millions and hundreds of thousands of dollars for years. It may be what initially motivates some folks to take that leap of faith, but you're seeing a ton of folks rant and rave about art, right? About every Dale Keown cover, about Fiendish from Rennie, right? About Lucent, from Bancroft, about Kozar from the Barton Brothers. There's so many examples. There's all these review channels. People are talking about how inspired they are about other creations, and they look up to other creators. It's awesome. It's not just hyper focused on the money. And to me, that means a lot of people in CG really, really um, appreciate the quality, the content, and it's well balanced. And you do see that with Iron Age folks too, don't get me wrong. Um, but I do think it would benefit if they really hyper focused on cover art, right? On, honing, storytelling abilities, things like that. And so I really like the fact that in CG, everyone's talking about everyone else's creations, not just how much they make, right? It was the Kozar comic from the Barton brothers that inspired my covers. It's what got me to hire Corey. It was the campaign by Joe Ball, his Death, Death, Death campaign that really, inspired me as well. It also gave me that that motivation of like, hey, you can you can raise a lot of backing after your initial campaign. You can do it in demand. I mean, he went from like 15,000 after his campaign to now 90,000. It gave me hope and inspiration that I mean, not necessarily make that much, but maybe double, triple over time in demand. And it's what got me to hire him to make such a phenomenal cover for my campaign. It wasn't about the money they made. It was, again, the art and the creators themselves. I talked to them. They're all great people. Just awesome moral folks, family people, right? And to me, that's why I'm like super loyal to them. I want to continue to work with them, promote them. It wasn't just about the money they made. None of them made $1 million. I think their books, their art is worth more than some of the $1 million campaigns out there. I think they deserve it for sure. They just don't have that reach yet. The only way they're going to get more reach is if everybody promotes one another, especially from the top. So hopefully I hit on a majority of the points I was planning on hitting on. But again, to me, the foundations and beliefs of the Comicsgate folks and the Iron Age folks are basically the same. They mesh. It's just one side is not afraid to be considered a group or a community. The other, however, there are folks that are afraid of that and really just want to be considered an era or are just focused on the fact of how that term was coined by a well-known creator in that space. I do hope over time they continue or improve on being cohesive, propping each other up, because I think both can benefit from one another. I think if folks in Iron Age start distancing themselves from Comicsgate, they're going to miss out on potential backers, sales, artists that they can work with. It just doesn't make sense. They should be working together to improve the indie space. If you don't want to have one label or the other, that's fine. But in the end, you should want the best for everybody. And again, if we can get this focus around the quality and the content, then again, that financial success will come. But it won't come very well if you do not, get the word out. If you don't expand on your reach. And let's be honest, it's hard to get reach organically or without the help of others. So we shouldn't be afraid to reach out to people, to ask for help, and to provide that help. Especially once you get bigger, if you get bigger, don't forget about where you were once at. Make sure you help those people. Remember how you gained your success. Everybody had help at one point or the other. So yeah, that's my long-winded discussion on Iron Age and Comicsgate. And yeah, I'd be very interested to see what everybody thinks. Leave some comments, whether on Twitter or on here. And again, I'm just speaking on this stuff because I want to see people grow. I want to see the focus, shift away from just solely on, what are people making and to try to increase the spirit of like, hey, let's promote one another, let's help each other, Let's help everybody get backers. I mean, that's the only way the indie space is going to grow. So, thank you, everybody. God bless. I almost forgot. I need to promote myself. Everybody, go take a look at my Indiegogo campaign or my Fund My Comic campaign, Vigilantes Creed. It's about a gargoyle and a team of vigilantes fighting terror in Detroit. There are 2 novels and a mini comic. Both novels are roughly 250 pages. As you can see, the Corey Barton cover art, very beautiful. There's book 1. And then there's also the duology option, the 2-in-1. Both novels, around 500 pages, this amazing 2-way Joe Ball cover. When I mean 2-way, I mean just look at it. Works in this direction, works in this direction. If you want to get a novel, wait, no, you need to get this novel. I mean, literally, this is the most immersive novel reading experience you will ever have, or I think that you'll have anytime soon. Um, it's a high octane story with Lovecraftian vibes. It's about true heroism, fighting a true villain. It's got grit, it's got emotion, and it's got a ton of biblical and supernatural lore. And the reason why it's so immersive is it has a supplemental mini comic. All right, it shows key scenes from the book where it depicts or it introduces all the major and supporting characters with key information about each so that as you're reading, you can actually picture the characters as they're meant to look, right? And you can actually look for those details as a refresher in case you put the book down. And so the whole idea is while you're reading, you can play it out like a movie. You're not hyper focused on trying to piece together how do these characters look? How did he describe them? It's right there. You can focus on the context, you can focus on the action in the scene versus being distracted. And so, unlike some novels, this is not a slow, boring novel. It's very engaging and it's very exciting. So, please go check out Vigilantes Creed. The link is in the description. And if you don't mind, promote me. I'll promote you. I'll do my best. And again, thank you guys. Take care.